Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tuesday Tips. I'm your host, Marin Smith, content manager here at Grow Schools. And as usual, we're here Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern for 10 minutes, talking about all the challenges facing school leaders. And this week, we're welcoming Niki back. Hi, Niki. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We're having a discussion today on design that works. So visual communication strategies for school leaders. And Niki, I know so many schools are creating their own marketing materials in-house, often without formal design training. And so understanding sort of basic design principles can really make a difference between materials that get noticed and those that get ignored or that get chaotic or cumbersome or hard to work with. So let's start with the basics. When people think about visual identity, one of the first things they think about is things like color. So can you talk about how schools can choose a color palette that reflects their brand while still being accessible and readable for all audiences?
Absolutely. That's a great question because colors communicate even before your words do. I know specifically in the Western culture, we already associate certain feelings and values with colors. For instance, navy and burgundy tend to be traditional colors with messages like trust and tradition. So that might be more appropriate for an established institution. Alternatively, bright blues and greens give a sense of innovation, energy. So that might be more appropriate for a school that specializes in STEM programs or are more progressive. So you want to start by asking, what is your school's personality? Are you a traditional school that focuses on academics and has been around for decades? Then you might be leaning more towards those conservative colors. Or are you an innovative charter school with maker spaces and project-based learning? Then perhaps you want to lean into those bright colors that might be a better match for your values and your culture. Overall, you're aiming to have about 5 to 6 colors to establish your color palette. You want 2 primary brand colors, 2 accent colors, plus a dark neutral and a light neutral. So once you've chosen these colors that you reflect your values, you want to make sure they ensure that they work for everybody. So accessibility isn't just good practice. Sometimes it's legally required. You want to make sure when you choose these colors that they have sufficient contrast so you can easily read text on these different colored backgrounds. If you want to get really nerdy about it, the minimum requirement is a 4.5 to 1 contrast. There are tools to help you with this. So with both generating color palettes and testing the ratio, one of my favorite sites is coolors.co. That's coolors.co. You can generate color palettes. You can lock specific colors, and it will suggest colors that complement the locked color. And then you can run that by the contrast checker. You also want to think about print considerations. These days, we're generating these color palettes online. So those are going to be RGB hex values, but for print, those use CMYK, which is a 4-color print process. So you want to find the equivalent for that. And if you have a lot of promotional materials, you might be required to provide a Pantone color value. So as you build that color palette, you want to find the equivalent color in all those different formats. And finally, don't be afraid to test these colors, print them on paper, view them on different devices. Ask staff with varying vision abilities to review materials before you finalize anything. Just test it and see what works.
Yeah, I love that. It's quite more complicated than just picking some colors out of a hat. So you've really broken it down in a helpful way. And then once those colors are selected and it comes to applying those colors to real world materials like flyers, it's important that your layout is also accessible and readable. So what sorts of principles would you recommend in that medium?
Yeah, I actually have a quick personal story that goes along with this. So when I was in college, I was originally a performing arts administration major. I wanted to be a music director. And I happened to pick up this book called The Non-Designer's Design Book by Robin Williams, not the actor. And immediately, that's where I realized I love graphic design. It changed my trajectory. I changed my major, and I ended up majoring in visual communications instead because of this book. One of my favorite principles out of this book is called the CRAP principle. Terrible name, but it stands for contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. So contrast means you want your most important information to pop off the page. You want to make your headline significantly larger than everything else, use bold colors for your key details, and don't be afraid of white space because the white space creates attention to the item in the center. Think of this as your attention grabber. Repetition keeps everything looking cohesive. You want to use the same fonts throughout that you've established, repeat your school colors, maintain spacing. If you use a certain style for bullets in one area, use the same style for bullets in another area. That's what makes your materials look professional. Alignment means don't place things on your page randomly. Everything should be lining up with something else on the page. So whether you left align your body text or center your headlines, you just want to be intentional about it. The goal is that you are setting the goal of where the eye is drawn and how it scans information in a specific order. And proximity means you're grouping related information together. For instance, you want to put your event details kind of close together, create a visual space where you have your contact information, and then like separate other information. You basically think of your information in chunks. This helps people's eyes organize the information quickly. So overall, you want to use this 5-second test. If someone can't understand your main message in 5 seconds, then you need to simplify. And remember, white space is your friend. I know it's tempting to try to put everything in a flyer, but when everything competes for attention, nothing gets it.
Yeah, that idea of visual hierarchy, right? And that 5-second rule, I love that. And maybe that's a good way to bring it to, somebody on your staff and say, quick, tell me what this event is about, or tell me how I should register. What should I do? Where's the call to action?
And having like that one main issue instead of trying to ask for 3 different things.
Totally. Yeah. I'm excited about this next question because my background is as a writer, and I have strong opinions about things like fonts and typography beyond, don't use Comic Sans and things like that. But I'm really curious. So you have your layout. What typography choices can help these materials look professional and easy to read? Because fonts gets really overwhelming.
We could do a whole Tuesday tips on just this. So as a quick overview, yes, this is where you have a lot of impact. And just so you said, you want to try to keep the typography professional. The easiest way to do this is to stick to 2 main fonts. You select one for your headings and one for your body text. Occasionally, if you want a third font for like small accents, that's fine. But it comes back to that principle of contrast. Your typefaces should be sufficiently different in weight and density than your body copy. So even like, let's say you're squinting and like leaning back and you can't read the words, you should still be able to tell the difference between a headline and the body copy. You also don't want to just rely on color. You want to create that hierarchy with size and weight. Just in case someone's looking at your materials in just black and white. And you want to test those combinations in different variations. So what might work in a small dose may not work in a longer format. But to get back to your question on how to pick and pair those fonts, again, there's so many great tools that help. Fontjoy.com and fontpair.co both provide tools so you can see the 2 fonts together, and they make suggestions as to which fonts will work together well. And you can even lock a specific one and it will give you suggestions as to what to put with it.
Yeah, great. That's a great tool. I might poke around on there myself just for fun because it sounds like a fun space to hang out. Okay, we have all these puzzle pieces. And here's my last question for you, which is, how schools or any other additional tips you might give about maintaining visual consistency across different platforms. So you mentioned print materials versus online and how that might influence your color palette. But what about websites and social media and print materials? Should they be different? Should they all look the same? Should they be variations on a theme? How does all that work?
Yeah, I mean, you're like you said, your audience encounters your school everywhere: social media, newsletters, websites, signage, and they should all feel cohesive. If you really want to make variations across, you can use the 80-20 rule, where 80% is definitely consistent with 20% adding variations specific to the device. But the rule of thumb, it's a really boring answer, but it's documentation. But that's what helps everything. You create a brand kit, and that brand kit contains your exact color codes, your fonts, your logo versions. So by having these documented, that means anyone creating materials have this access to those same building blocks. Templates are also your friend. So Canva does have some pre-made templates, and those may be good in a pinch. I know, as you mentioned, sometimes schools don't have the resources to hire a designer or have a designer on staff, but perhaps you can outsource some design work just for the case of making templates. So not ongoing work that can be created in Canva that's custom to your school. And then continuing forward, the staff can update those existing templates on their own. And again, while you might have some variations of small elements, you do want to ensure your colors are consistent across all the formats. That blue should match from the website to print to social. Photography should also be similar. So you want to audit all of these things regularly. Pull up your website, your print materials, Facebook. And the main question is, do they all look like the same organization, the same school? Because the ultimate goal is that when parents are scrolling, they immediately recognize the school and what the message is and where it's coming from.
Yeah, I feel like we could have a whole nother conversation about even this last question and brand kits and what should be in there and how, they can be leveraged as a tool for people who might be new to a role where they're like, what font should I use? Because that's where you get into trouble, is lots of creative minds kind of coming together and making those creative decisions. So really, really great insights today. I want to thank you again for joining us. We're here Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, again, for 10 minutes. In this case, we had more to say, so a little over 10 minutes, discussing all the challenges facing school leaders. And for those of you watching, you can learn more about design resources, marketing support, website design from Niki. She's got a lot of great blog posts and guides over on our site at growschools.com. You can check out the resource library. So thanks again, Niki.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And we hope to see you again soon.